All right. Hello. Welcome to this wealthmanagement.com Fast Chat. I'm David Armstrong, the editor-in-chief of wealthmanagement.com. And today I'm thrilled to be speaking with Mark Tibergien, who is our inaugural wealthmanagement.com Industry Awards Lifetime Achievement Award winner. Mark, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you. And thank you for the recognition.
Well, it certainly was an easy conversation in the judges' room. The judges wanted to recognize this for the first time after 10 years of these awards. We're giving out a Lifetime Achievement Award, and your name was top of the list. So it was an easy conversation, an easy sale in the judges' room. I think everyone's a fan. But take me back a little bit as a career overview. We share something that we both grew up in Michigan. I know you grew up in the Upper Peninsula. How from there did you wind up in Chicago? I think your first job was a journalist, and from there on to the financial services industry.
Great question. It was an outward migration, ironically, because my family had migrated into the UP from Belgium when they came over. And so I went to school in Wisconsin. I worked for a while in radio and newspaper up in Michigan, and then was recruited to work for Investment Dealers Digest in Chicago, which was my first introduction, frankly, to finance, not just writing for a national publication, but into the subject of finance. And in particular, I was covering the OTC market and at the time of NASDAQ and the investment banking world. And so it was quite a revelation, and it whet my appetite for more about this business.
About financial services in general.
Yeah.
You end up then as a partner at Moss Adams, the consulting firm. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your early days at Moss Adams and what you were doing there, and how you kind of stumbled upon this kind of growing arena of wealth planners and financial planners in the financial services space?
Actually, there were a couple of interim stops. I was recruited to join a firm out of Portland called Willamette Management, which was both an RIA and a business valuation firm. And Shannon Pratt, who was the founder of Willamette, was in the very first class of CFP graduates. And he said to me, "You really need to get involved with this financial planning thing because I believe it's going to be a big deal." And this was in the 1970s. So I joined the local IAFP, which was the Financial Planning Association at the time, and ultimately rose up to become president of it, and then ultimately went on the national board, where I met so many people in the industry. And it was quite transformational in terms of a profession, because these were mostly small practitioners who were involved and starting small businesses. I eventually left Willamette to join a company called Willamette Management, which I became president of. Management Advisor Services. Management Advisor Services was a training and consulting firm, particularly for banks and businesses. We did that globally. And that's how I really started to become committed more to the consulting side of the business. We sold that firm to Moss Adams. That's how I ended up becoming a partner of the accounting firm. And Bob Bunting, who was chair of Moss Adams at the time, said, "Now that you don't have a company to run, there are three things I'd recommend. One is that you identify an industry specialty, you identify a technical specialty, and you become famous for both." And that's how I truly made the commitment to financial planning, financial advice, wealth management, and transformed it from there.
It really was early on in the almost a kind of a cottage industry of financial planners out there at the time. And I think people credit your work at Moss Adams with doing some of the first benchmark studies in the space, some of the first compensation studies in the space. So kind of early to recognize the contours of the industry and help define it in some ways. Is that accurate?
It's accurate, but actually it began earlier when I was at Management Advisory Services, because we were using benchmarking studies. We were teaching business financial management, so we just applied it to this industry, which is how this all really turned into an operating business model when we finally moved over to Moss Adams. So it actually began in the late 80s, to be perfectly frank, as to how this started to unfold.
But then recognizing the RIA space and the growing independent wealth management space, and putting some of the early, very industry-specific benchmarks to that industry, I think is where Moss Adams kind of cut its teeth, yes?
It is true. Both with RIAs and independent broker-dealers, we were creating benchmark studies for both and providing training and education along those lines. And that I think because Moss Adams was a large, super regional accounting firm, it added a level of credibility to it. And at the time, we had Schwab as a sponsor. So the study that they do now was actually originally created by us. And that really launched it into a truly scalable offering.
And then 2007, 2008, joined Pershing. Were they a client at the time, or how did the Moss Adams to Pershing?
There was no relationship at all. Frankly, they were seeking to build out an RIA custody business, and so they were interviewing a variety of people. They had a nascent business. It was about maybe 35 billion of assets at the time. So they reached out to me, and my wife and I were quite intrigued to move to New York, and we were just going to do it for 3 years, and it turned out to be 14 years. So it's funny how time flies. But that was a challenging time because as you might recall, that was an economic crisis for this country back then when I joined at the end of 2007. And but ultimately, everything turned around, and we built up quite a nice business serving RIAs alongside the clearing business at Pershing.
Sure, the clearing business as well. I mean, the great financial crisis, ironically, was good for a lot of the folks on the RIA side of the business, correct?
It started to create an industry disruption, I would say, is that people recognize the value of fiduciary advice. They recognize the desire to create their own firms rather than being employed by others. It elevated some of the standards of practice. And so it was actually a good time to begin thinking about it. And also at that time, we were beginning to see much larger businesses evolve, not just practices, but they've moved on to enterprises. And that too became transformational as far as we were concerned.
I was going to ask what you thought of as your biggest change that you recognized in the industry during your tenure at Pershing, but I imagine that's probably it, right?
Pretty much. It was an industry that was dominated by Schwab, Fidelity, and TD Ameritrade at the time in terms of custody. So having a new entrant in the market really required us to be unique and specific in our positioning so that we weren't just another provider. So we focused on professionally managed advisory firms serving clients with complex lives. That was our whole mantra. And that was different than just being a custodian. And it allowed us to have an average advisor around $1 billion of assets. So it grew quite dramatically, but the unique positioning helped us compete against 3 really outstanding firms.
Mentorship became very important to you, I know, and it's something you've spoken about a lot. Can you tell me a little bit about your philosophy around mentorship, why it's been so important in your career?
Mentorship, I think of as different than management in that it's really helping people in the fulfillment of their passion, helping them to recognize where they may feel like frauds in terms of what they're doing and helping them unlock that, where helping them to understand what business they're in and what their role is and what their career path is. But what was unique at Pershing is we also introduced reverse mentoring. And Kayla Kennelly, who's at Goldman Sachs now, was my first reverse mentor, where we took younger employees who actually taught us older people what to be thinking about in terms of developing new generations of individuals and how we could learn more about technology from their standpoint and other applications. So it had a way of unlocking things for me, even though I was in an advanced stage of business at the time.
Mentorship goes both ways, for sure. This is going to put you on the spot, but I think one of the things that people say about your career was how many of these folks that you've mentored or at least served under your tutelage at some point have gone on to great roles here in the industry, particularly on the independent RIA side of the business. And do you want to just reflect on that a little bit? I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you think about that? Do you think about the number of folks out there who owe some part of their achievement in this industry to you?
Well, I don't know that anybody owes me anything. I think that we've had a good relationship with each other. When I look at people like Philip Polivev or Eliza DePardo or Rebecca Pommering or Kathy Gibson, it's really quite a lengthy list of people that I've had in my orbit, both at Moss Adams and then at Pershing with Ben Harrison, who is one of the leaders there, Evan Lahada, Christina Townsend. These are all individuals who had the chops to do what they were doing. It was helping them to focus their efforts in a way that allowed their careers to unfold. But I wouldn't take credit for their success. I was perhaps a catalyst for some things that they were doing, but I wouldn't say that they wouldn't have done it without me, because that would be woefully underestimating their impact and their ability to do things.
Well said. Tell me, if you were to look forward, what you think the industry has yet to accomplish that it needs to. It's moved forward quite a bit under your leadership and others. What hasn't happened here yet that needs to?
I think that I've been around this industry now for 50 years, so starting in the 1970s. And each decade we've seen truly meaningful change, both in the way people deliver advice and in the way businesses operate. So when we look at the evolution over that time, it's been quite profound, but there's still things on the horizon that are driven by the dynamics of change. So, for example, there still is an acute talent shortage within the advisory business. We haven't made it a compelling career choice for people who might choose to go into technology or programming or medicine or law or some other profession. So that is a big area where we have to create more meaningful employers of choice. Second, I think that the client experience has to evolve. As much as we talk about financial planning as being core to the offer of many of these firms, the truth is that technology has not kept pace with the reporting aspects of financial planning. There's the analysis, there's the recommendations, but assuming that financial planning is not a transaction or an event, but an ongoing relationship, then the question is, what would be the nature of reporting that shows how people are making decisions and what the impact is of those decisions long term? This is an area where I think meaningful evolution has to occur. Third, clearly the development of professional management is a missing link in this business. I think that we have found a lot of technicians who moved up into top leadership positions, but more and more we're going to be needing true leaders and business managers because the business is becoming far more complex, and that will be transformative as we see us go from where we are today, a collection of small businesses, to what I hope to be a number of large businesses going forward.
That's excellent. One more quick question for you. Do you think in that transformation that you're talking about, there's a danger that what has been the fiduciary side of the business, small collection of small businesses, advisors looking out for the best interests of their clients, evolves into these larger corporations, these larger businesses, professionally run, professionally managed, often with relationships in other areas of financial services, including asset management, evolves into the thing that a lot of these folks were trying to get away from in the first place?
Well, I think that there is always a risk of dysfunction the more complex the business becomes. I think to some extent the regulators are attempting to actually create higher standards of behavior within all aspects of financial advice. So I'm a little less concerned about drifting backwards. I think that those who invest in these firms as consolidators need to recognize that there is a difference between a professional seller and a professional buyer, which the RIA market is. And so that has a different economic driver going forward. But no doubt about it, the culture that large organizations create and the behaviors that they expect is something where there has to be leadership and management acting effectively and dynamically to ensure that they don't lose their soul.
That's excellent. Well, Mark, thank you very much for joining us on this Fast Chat, and congratulations again on the Lifetime Achievement Award, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.